What is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency? Hello, viewer. Who's in chat? We're looking up the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency, CISA. CISA's footprint grew to include roles protecting the census, managing national special security events, the U.S. response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Overseeing 5G network security, securing elections, strengthening the U.S. grid against, really, EMPs. Headquartered in Arlington, Virginia. In 2025, planning on moving its headquarters along with 6,500 employees to a new 10-story building in the DHS St. Elizabeth's campus HQ. On November 16th, 2018, President Trump signed the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency Act 2018. Chris Krebs was the director of the NPPD. Oh no, was the undersecretary. Became CISA's first director. Former underdeputy, deputy under secretary Matthew Travis became its first deputy director. On January 22nd, 2019, CISA issued its first emergency directive, 19-01, mitigate DNS infrastructure tampering. It warned that an active attacker is targeting government organizations using DNS spoofing techniques for man-in-the-middle attacks. FireEye research group stated that initial research suggests the actor or actors responsible have a nexus in Iran, who is, I believe, a Russian ally. They are strategic partners, strategic allies. In 2020, CISA created a website called Rumor Control to rebut disinformation associated with the 2020 U.S. presidential election. November 12th, 2020. Krebs indicated that he expected to be dismissed from his post by the Trump admin. This was after CISA issued a press release asserting that no evidence that any voting system deleted or lost votes could be found. Oh. So they had no director for 9 months? 11 to 7 plus 2? Page 389. The Clark letter. On December 28th. Oh, shit. On December 28th, 2020, Clark sent a 5-page draft letter. Jeffrey Clark? Clark sent a 5-page draft letter to Donahue and Rosen. The letter was addressed to three Georgia state officials: Governor Brian Kemp, Speaker of the House David Ralston, and President pro tempore of the Senate Butch Miller. It contained places for Rosen and Donahue to affix their signatures, which they steadfastly refused to do. The letter, if signed and sent, may very well have provoked a constitutional crisis. But we haven't already been in one for the last year. The letter was attached to an email from Clark in which he requested authorization to attend a classified briefing by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, led by DNI Ratcliffe, on foreign election interference issues. The Office of DNI did not find any foreign interference in the voting process or counting, but Clark apparently believed some of the conspiracy theories that had been floated. Specifically, Clark claimed that hackers have evidence in the public domain that a Dominion machine accessed the internet through a smart thermostat with a net connection trail leading back to China. Oh, Christ, I remember this. He also said that the ODNI may have additional classified information. This crackpot claim had been shared by other Trump officials and associates as well. Ultimately, after Clark received the ODNI briefing that would have supported his earlier suspicion, he acknowledged to Donahue that there was nothing in that briefing that would have supported his earlier suspicion about foreign involvement. Jesus. Clark intended to send the letter to officials in Georgia and several other contested states that President Trump needed to flip if he was going to overturn the election results. The Department of Justice is investigating various irregularities in the 2020 election for the President of the United States, Clark wrote. The department will update you as we are able on investigatory progress, but at this time we have identified significant concerns that may have impacted the outcome of the election in multiple states, including the state of Georgia. Clark continued by arguing that Georgia's state legislature should call a special session. In light of these developments, the department recommends that the Georgia General Assembly should convene in a special session so that its legislators are in a special position to take additional testimony. additional testimony, receive new evidence, and deliberate on the matter consistent with its duties under the U.S. Constitution, Clark wrote. Clark referenced the fake electors that the president and his campaign organized and argued that there were two competing slates of electors, both of which were legitimate. The department believes that in Georgia and several other states, both a slate of electors supporting Joseph Biden and a separate slate of electors supporting Donald Trump gathered on December 14th, 2020 at the proper location to cast their ballots, and that both sets of those ballots have been transmitted to Washington, D.C. to be opened by Vice President Pence. The letter was a lie. Senior DOJ officials Barr, Rosen, and Donahue have repeatedly stated the opposite, They found no evidence of fraud that would have impacted the election's results, none. But since mid-November, the Trump campaign's legal team under Giuliani attempted to execute its dual-track strategy of both filing lawsuits and convincing state legislatures in contested states to appoint separate slates of presidential electors for President Trump. By late December, however, the dual-track approach had largely failed, and no legislatures had sent a second lawful slate of electors for Trump to Congress. Do we have this letter? Let's find this letter. 181. What is this, chapter 4? $189. Pre-certification events. Documents on file with the Senate Select Committee. Nope, not the PDF. Nope, not that. Fuck, where was that? There we go. Documents on file. 200 per page. None there. None there. None there. Fuck, is it missing? How do we find it? Aha. Mm-hmm. Details. Department of Justice Production, HCR pre-certification events, 000702. Aha. No. 000702. So this is the wrong one. Can we... 000697? GPOJ6 doc control. Why don't they fucking make this better? Close the January. That's where I just was, right? Yeah. Let's check their website. Documents on file. Justin Clark. Interview. Okay. We don't want interviews. We want documents on file. No. Fuck. Committee members and staff. Indices. Recommendations. No. Well, fucking stuck. That's it. 697. 697. Document ID. So why isn't the doc ID in the actual report? One series 21. PDF. Clark to Rosen, December 28th. Rosen, December 28th. Jeff and Rich, I would like to have your authorization to get a classified briefing tomorrow from ODNI led by DNI Radcliffe on foreign election interference issues. I can then assess how that relates to activating the IEEPA and 2018 executive order powers on such matters, now twice renewed by the president. If you had not seen it, white hat hackers have evidence that a Dominion machine accessed the internet through a smart thermostat with a net connection trail leading back to China. ODNI might have more classified information. Attached is a draft letter concerning the broader topic of election irregularities of any kind. The concept is to send it to the governor, speaker, and president pro temp of each relevant state to indicate that in light of time urgency and sworn evidence of election irregularities presented to courts and to legislative committees, the legislatures thereof should each assemble and make a decision about elector appointment in light of their deliberations. I set it up for signature by the three of us. I think we should get it out as soon as possible. Personally, I see no valid downsides to sending out the letter. I put it together quickly and would want to do a formal site check before sending, but I don't think we should let unnecessary moss grow on this. As a small letter, I left open me signing as Assistant Attorney General Civil, AAG Civil, after an order from Jeff as Acting AG, designating me as actual AAG of Civil under the Ted Olson LLC opinion, and thus freeing me continue to think there's no downside, with as few as 23 days left in the president's term. Okay. Same document. Same document. Jeffrey Clark or Justin Clark? Is it the same guy? Is there just one Clark? Same document. Attached is a draft letter. There's no letter attached. Really? Maybe a D12? Ah, there it is. Found it. Dear Governor Kemp, Mr. Speaker and Mr. President pro tempore, the DOJ is investigating various irregularities in the 2020 election for the President of the United States. The department will update you as we are able to on investigatory progress, but at this time we have identified significant concerns that may have impacted the outcome of the election in multiple states, including the state of Georgia. No doubt, many of Georgia's state legislators are aware of irregularities sworn to by a variety of witnesses, and we have taken notice of their complaints. See, for example, the chairman's report, blah, 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 blah. In light of these developments, the department recommends that the Georgia General Assembly should convene a special session so that its legislators are in a position to take additional testimony, receive new evidence, and deliberate on the matter consistent with its duties under the U.S. Constitution. Time is of the essence, as the U.S. Constitution tasks Congress with convening in joint session to count electoral college certificates, consider objections to any of those certificates, and decide between any competing slates of elector certificates. 3 U.S.C. Section 15 provides that this session shall begin on January 6th, with the Vice President presiding over the session as President of the Senate. The Constitution mandates that Congress must set the day for electors to meet to cast their ballots, which Congress did in 3 U.S.C. U.S. Code Section 7, and which for this election occurred on December 14th, 2020. It was 14 days prior. The department believes that in Georgia and several other states, both a slate of electors supporting Joseph Biden and a separate slate of electors supporting Donald Trump gathered on that day at the proper location to cast their ballots, and that both sets of those ballots had been transmitted to Washington, D.C. to be opened by Vice President Pence. That is not true. Really, I can't just copy that. The department is aware that a similar situation occurred in the 1960 election. There, Vice President Richard Nixon appeared to win the state of Hawaii on Election Day, and electors supporting Vice President Nixon cast their ballots on the day specified, which were duly certified by the governor of Hawaii. But Senator John F. Kennedy also claimed to win Hawaii, with his electors likewise casting their ballots on the prescribed day, and that by January 6, 1961, it had been determined that Senator Kennedy was indeed the winner of Hawaii, so Congress accordingly accepted only the ballots cast for Senator Kennedy. This is chapter 4, part 1, 2, 3, 4. So part 2. Shit. 91. Clark continued by arguing that the Georgia state legislature should call a special session. The letter was a lie. Senior DOJ officials have repeatedly stated the opposite. They found no evidence of fraud. Giuliani's campaign dual track campaign. Filing lawsuits and convincing state legislatures to appoint separate slates of electors had failed. No doubt, a letter coming from the Department of Justice is different from a meandering call from Giuliani or one of his associates. And because it was December 28th and there was little more than a week until the January 6th joint session of Congress, President Trump needed more, and soon. Clark's letter, which laid out a plan that was almost identical to what President Trump and his team had pressured state officials to carry out virtually since Election Day, could have been just what President Trump needed. This paralleled Giuliani's campaign. Let's finish reading the letter. The department also finds trouble. Oh, that. We need to clarify that. The department also finds troubling the current posture of a pending lawsuit in Fulton County, Georgia, raising several of the voting irregularities pertaining to which candidate for president received the most lawfully cast votes in Georgia. Trump versus Raffensperger, which we, I think, have a thing on. No, we don't. Trump versus Raffensperger. Despite the action having been filed on December 4th, the trial court there has not even scheduled a hearing on the matter, making it difficult for the judicial process to consider this evidence and resolve these matters on appeal prior to January 6th. Given the urgency of this serious matter, including the Fulton County litigation's sluggish pace, the department believes that a special session of the Georgia General Assembly is warranted and is in the national interest. The Electors Clause of the United States Constitution provides that each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct electors to cast ballots for president and VP. Many state legislatures originally chose electors by direct appointment, but over time each state legislature has chosen to do so by popular vote on the day appointed by Congress to be the election day for members of Congress, which this year was November 3rd. However, Congress also explicitly recognizes the power that state legislatures have to appoint electors, providing that whenever a state has held an election for the purpose of choosing electors and has failed to make a choice on the day prescribed, the electors may be appointed on a subsequent day in such a manner as the legislature of such state may direct. The purpose of the special session that the department recommends would be for the General Assembly to 1. Evaluate the irregularities in the 2020 election, including violations of Georgian state law judged against that body of law as it has been enacted by your state's legislature. 2. Determine whether those violations show which candidate for president won the most legal votes in the November 3rd election. And 3. Whether the election failed to make a proper and valid choice between the candidates, such that the General Assembly could take whatever action is necessary to ensure that one of the slates of electors cast on December 14th will be accepted by Congress on January 6th. While the DOJ believes the governor of Georgia should immediately call a special session to consider this important and urgent matter, if he declines to do so, we share with you our view that the Georgia General Assembly has implied authority under the Constitution of the United States to call itself into special session for the limited purpose of considering issues pertaining to the appointment of presidential electors. The Constitution specifies that presidential electors shall be appointed by the legislature of each state. And the framers clearly knew how to distinguish between a state legislature and a state executive, so their disparate choices to refer to one The other or both must be respected. When the government intends to refer to laws enacted by the legislature and signed by the governor, the Constitution refers to it simply as the state. They're jumping through a lot of hoops. Additionally, the draft letter recommended that the Georgia legislature consider choosing the alternative fake slate of electoral college electors that sent fake electoral college votes to Congress and Vice President Pence. Having state legislatures Choose Trump electors in states where President Trump lost was one of the Trump's team's early goals immediately after the election, but it didn't work. When no state legislature appointed its own set of electors before December 14th, the Trump campaign arranged for electors to meet in contested states anyway and cast fake electoral college votes. This letter to This letter, with the Department of Justice seal at the top, was just one more way that President Trump and those close to him could pressure state officials to send competing electoral college votes to Congress for consideration during the joint session, despite former Vice President Biden's certified victory in each of the contested states. Despite the similarities between the requests in Clark's proposed letter and the requests that President Trump and his team made to state officials for nearly 2 months, the extent to which Clark directly coordinated his actions with the Trump campaign and its outside advisors is unclear. Clark asserted his Fifth Amendment rights and various other privileges to avoid answering the Select Committee's questions about these and other topics. When Giuliani was asked during his Select Committee deposition whether he remembered discussing DOJ issuing a letter like Clark's, Giuliani refused to answer because it implicated attorney-client privilege with President Trump. But when asked if he recalled ever recommending that Clark be given election-related responsibilities at DOJ, Giuliani said, "I do recall saying to people that somebody should be put in charge of the Justice Department who isn't frightened of what's going to be done to their reputation, because the Justice Department was filled with people like that." And the investigation has also revealed that Clark and John Eastman were in communication throughout this period. One person who had worked with Eastman and others in his circle was a lawyer installed to work with Clark at the Department of Justice in mid-December, the final weeks of the Trump administration, named Ken Klukowski. Klukowski was a Trump administration political appointee serving as a senior counsel under Clark in DOJ's Civil Division. After serving as a lawyer in the Office of Management and Budget for more than a year and volunteering as a lawyer for the Trump campaign after Election Day, Klukowski only joined the department when the administration's personnel staff expedited his appointment because the White House's Presidential Personnel Office wanted him in soon. On the morning of December 28th, Clark asked Klukowski to draft the Georgia letter for him. Clark dictated the substantive key points of the letter to Klukowski. And told him exactly what to include. After several meetings with Clark throughout the day to update him on progress, Klukowski turned in his assignment and gave the letter to Clark, which Clark sent along to Acting Attorney General Rosen and Acting Deputy Attorney General Donahue, as described above. Donahue quickly responded to Clark's email, stating there is no chance that I would sign this letter or anything remotely like this. The plan set forth by Clark was not even within the realm of possibility. Donahue warned that if they sent Clark's letter, it would be a grave step for the department to take, and it could have tremendous constitutional, political, and social ramifications for the country. Contrary to President Trump's and Clark's wild claims about the election, Donahue stressed that DOJ's ongoing investigations related to matters of such a small scale that they simply would not impact the outcome of the presidential election. Clark's assertion to the contrary was baseless. Donahue and Rosen reaffirmed their strong opposition to the draft letter in a contentious meeting with Clark on December 28th. What you are doing is nothing less than the United States Justice Department meddling in the outcome of a presidential election. Clark responded, "I think a lot of people have meddled in this election." Under questioning by Rosen and Donahue, Clark eventually also revealed that he had been in a meeting in the Oval Office with President Trump. Donahue demanded to know, "Why the hell are we hearing your name from the President of the United States and a congressman?" When Clark was reminded that meeting the president without authorization or informing his superiors was a clear violation of the White House contacts policy, he retorted, "It's a policy. There's a lot more at stake here than a policy." In fact, the contacts policy was designed for situations just like this, where political figures might try to influence criminal investigations or legal actions taken by the DOJ, as President Trump attempted to do. In the days that followed, Clark called witnesses, got a briefing from ODNI, and pursued his own investigations. Acting Deputy Attorney General Donahue was shocked to learn that Clark did not cease his efforts, even after learning there was no foreign interference. Instead of adhering to the facts, Clark doubled down. During a follow-up meeting on January 2nd, Clark acknowledged he had received the ODNI briefing, and he acknowledged that there was nothing in the briefing that would have supported his earlier suspicion about foreign involvement, but he nevertheless spewed out some of those theories, some of which we'd heard from the president, but others which were floating around the internet and media, and just kept insisting that the department needed to act and needed to send those letters. Okay. I think that's it for tonight. Have a good night. See you. See you tomorrow, probably.